Welcome to Forward Progress on the Hammer Betting Network on this Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024. Happy New Year to all of our loyal viewers and listeners. We've got an all-star show today. Week 18 in itself can be a tricky week to navigate and oftentimes some big betting opportunities. In order to sort through everything, we combine Monday and Tuesdays to steam lineups, and I'm joined today by Cleve TA, Plus EV Better, CleveAnalytics.com, Suma, Pro Sports Better, creator on the Hammer Betting Network, and Sharp Clark, NFL originator, betting analyst at 4for4.com. Of course, this show is brought to you by Pinnacle. They're the world's sharpest sports book and available to bettors in Ontario. Find out what the pros have known for the last 25 years. Everyday competitive odds, your trusted sports book. Bet smart, bet Pinnacle, must be 19 plus in Ontario. Before we get the show on the road, I want everybody to hammer the like button. And if you're not already doing so, please subscribe to the channel. I want to pass the Hit the Books channel just so we can throw it in Kanish's face. Let's have a moment of reflection, though, before we start the show. The season is here we are, week 18, and then the playoffs start. I want to ask each of you, and I'll start with you, Cleve. What's one team that surprised you, either in a good way or a bad way?
I'll say the Rams for me, and maybe I should have looked a little deeper, but just based on their roster in the preseason, I knew that obviously Stafford is a good quarterback, but you had Cooper Kupp coming off the ACL injury, and he was hurt late in the offseason or late in training camp. We did not know about Puka Nacua, so that was clearly someone who has helped this offense, especially when Cooper Kupp was out a ton. But just the rest of that roster, especially the defense, there was only, as Aaron Donald and essentially nobody else. There's a bunch of young rookies, guys mid-round draft picks. I think there was only one other kind of top 3-round draft pick on the entire defensive roster, at least a starting roster. So it was hard for me to envision, this level of team. But I got to hand it to McVay, and obviously having Nacua step up, and they've all played well, and the defense is come out of the blue to at least be league average. So all those things definitely surprised me from a win total perspective.
Yeah, we often talk about like the coordinators that are doing the best job this year, and Raheem Morris doesn't get brought up enough. He's done a great job. The Rams are my team as well. I think I bet their win total under and was expecting a top 5 pick for them. Clark, what about you? Who's the team that surprised you the most in a good or bad way this year?
Yeah, it was either the Colts or the Texans, both surprised to the upside. But I got to go with the Colts because with the Texans, it was just C.J. Stroud turned out to be awesome. With the Colts, their starting quarterback got hurt, and they still exceeded expectations by margin. And I think the way that Shane Steichen took what was, I thought, a dead team going into the year in a full rebuild mode into a playoff contender, I thought was really impressive with all the injuries they had to deal with. So Colts for me.
Suma, what about you?
These guys stole my first two.
Yeah, these are my top two as well. I didn't see either of these come in. And Cleve saw Indy coming, so he's at least off the hook with that one.
Wait, didn't Clark have the Rams? Did you have his Rams a surprise team?
No. I was optimistic on the Rams.
That's what I'm saying. You had them in the upside. I had Indy on the upside. So it was like, could have just traded thoughts on those.
I know. Yeah, we should listen to each other more.
Suma, what did we get right? Because all these guys done have brought up what we got wrong.
Then I will go with my 4th team, and that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I saw some upside cases for the Rams, for example, or for the Texans if Stroud is very good, but I did not see it with the Bucs at all. Like, I thought this would be a very bad football team. I did not like Todd Bowles, who surprised me a lot with all these crazy 4th down decisions throughout the year. Baker Mayfield surprised me tremendously. He's really playing a great season, and I just did not see this Bucs team being at 9-7 and looking at a wild card spot come week 18.
Someone in this chat did, and they predicted them to win the division. So let's walk through the playoff scenarios, guys, because it feels like this year is more complicated than most. And we got a ton of engagement in the comments. And guys, fire away because we are going to answer a lot of good questions. But Jason, if you can pull off the playoff picture, and let me see if I can do this in a succinct manner. The current seeds that are locked in, the Ravens, as the 1 seed, the Chiefs as the 3 seed, and the Browns as the 5 seed. Nothing will change those outcomes. For the 2 seed in the AFC, it's either going to be Miami or Buffalo. It'll be the winner of that gets in. The 6 seed can be Miami. If they lose to Buffalo, they would be locked in as the 6 seed. Otherwise, it looks like it's going to be the winner of Houston and Indy. And then finally, the 7 seed could be one of numerous teams, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, depending on the outcomes. And as we go through each game, I'll walk you through how they get in so that I don't overload you with information right now. Let's look at the NFC. The only seed that's locked in is San Francisco. Jason, if you can pull that back up. The 2 seed is likely going to be Dallas or Philly. Whoever wins their game. If Dallas wins, it'll be them as the 2 seed. If they lose and Philly wins, they'll be the 2 seed. And Detroit has an outside chance if they win and both Dallas and Philly loses. Realistically, though, it's going to probably be Dallas in the 2 seed, Detroit in the 3 seed. The 5 seed will be Philadelphia, and then the 4 seed will be the NFC South. The Bucks win and they're in. The Saints can win the division if they win and the Bucks lose. And Atlanta can win the division if they win and both the Bucks and Saints lose. Half the job would be done because they would be the ones beating the Saints. And then the Rams are the most likely 6 seed. But if they were to lose and Green Bay wins, then the Rams would be the 7 seed and the Green Bay would be the 6 seed. Seattle only gets into the playoffs if Green Bay and the Rams lose. And there's one other scenario if Minnesota gets in, and I'll save that for when we get there because of how unlikely it is. Not predictions, guys. Maybe this is futures equity. Or just as a fan, Suma, who do you want to see get in? Like, which team do you want to make sure that they get in the playoffs? And then which team do you not want to see in the playoffs?
So, futures equity Bills. I find it very crazy, like sitting on a 20-1 AFC ticket, and that could go up in flames on like Sunday night, which is pretty crazy to think about. From an entertainment perspective, I would like to see the Texans with CJ Stroud. I think the Packers would be a little bit more fun than the Seahawks. There's a very, very tiny chance scenario that the Bears get in. I mean, it's like 0.1% or something, which would be incredible because I absolutely love chaos in general. Also, from an entertainment perspective, I don't necessarily need the Jaguars to be in. Like, they are really running out of gas, in my opinion. Their offense, they are dealing with injuries, and if you could get me, like, I don't know, 2 more fun teams on offense in, I would probably prefer that over Jacksonville.
Just Cleveland Jags would be like the worst week 1 playoff game, right? We all agree that that's the one we probably don't want to watch. We don't all agree
with the Browns, but because of the Jaguars.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Jags, Cleveland. It's not Joe Flacco. Clark, you tweeted something out, like, has there ever been a team that's like the 3rd or 4th favorite to win the Super Bowl that could theoretically not make the playoffs entering week 18? Like, this is a little crazy town now, right?
Yeah. I have way too much leverage on the Bills right now that it feels super uncomfortable. I really love to see the Bills in, not just for my futures equity, but because they're a good team that would make the playoffs more interesting. Really don't want to see the Steelers. They have no business. They have no chance of going deep. I would like to see the Texans, now that Stroud is healthy again. I think they're just a more exciting team to have in the playoffs than the Colts. And then on the NFC, I'd love to see the Packers make it because I've really been enjoying watching Jordan Love grow over the course of the year. And maybe they even get Christian Watson back and make some noise on offense. And also they're one of those teams that has a great offense and a really bad defense. And so I just love when there's more excitement in playoff games. And then for the NFC South, I'd like to see the Saints make it. I know that that's unlikely because it will require the Panthers to beat the Bucks, but I just think that they're the best team in the NFC South, and I think that they might be a little bit underrated, so there might be some value on them going into the playoffs.
We joke about how the AFC was the gauntlet, but attrition has cost a lot of great quarterbacks in the AFC to go down. The NFC might have a wild card team of Philly, Rams, and Packers, who are all kind of frisky and dangerous. And then the AFC is a bunch of like, we don't have our quarterback, or, we're just stringing it all together. Cleve, who do you want to see in, and who do you want to see, whether it's from an equity position or if it's just from a fan standpoint?
So I do have a decent amount of equity positions on. I have the Colts to win the AFC South. So I have a nice ticket there. So that's definitely one that personally I would love to see. Obviously, if it wasn't for that, I'd rather see CJ Stroud in the playoff, because I actually think, they could at least rattle some cages with him in there. But from a pure monetary perspective, the Colts for sure. And then in the NFC, I have Green Bay to win their division. That's gone. But I've got some alts and to make the playoffs. So that's both on the line. So I want to see that. Plus, I think that with Jordan Love, their upside case is much higher than something that Seattle can give you. So I'll go with Green Bay. I think the NFC is pretty fun. The wild card games, if you can get whoever plays Detroit, whether it be the Rams or the Packers, are going to have a legitimate shot, and they're both going to be track meets, which is going to be fun. That's going to be the most entertaining round one game likely, unless we get Miami, Kansas City. But I think that's going to be that matchup is going to be really interesting. I'm not sure, and we already saw the Rams go to Dallas and get blown out. I think Green Bay's defense would be in trouble against Dallas as well. So I think either one of those teams against Dallas is in trouble. But I think against the Lions, either one has a real shot. So those are probably for me, who I want to see in there.
All right, let's talk about week 18. Oh yeah, Suma.
Do we all agree that Rams at Detroit is probably the greatest matchup in terms of storylines and stuff like that?
Oh yes. Especially if Stafford wins, because there's this perception that both teams won the trade, but if Stafford beats them again, it's like, no, the Rams just full out won this trade in a big way.
Don't bring that up, by the way, on Twitter, because the Detroit fans will come after you. I brought it up one as kind of a joke, that it's a Stafford revenge game like a couple of weeks ago. And I had all these Lions fans come at me because they said, no, it was very amicable. What are you talking about? I was like, oh, but I'm just making a joke, relax. They'll get mad because they're very protective of that trade and the Stafford years. So, but that would definitely be, what do you think that line is? Is it 3.5, 3? Are we looking kind of a field goal number, or you think it's on the 3? I mean, that total's got to be low 50s, right? 52.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's definitely a fun one.
Would be a fun one.
No city has had a more action-packed week than Michigan, the state of Michigan. They get their college football team winning with a last-minute drive against Alabama. The Detroit Pistons finally won a game against the Toronto Raptors, and then Detroit Lions had the controversy against Dallas. There's not a boring moment in Detroit talk sports. Let's talk about week 18, Cleve. I went to try to price some of this stuff, and usually I do it before looking at the market and seeing the discrepancies. And then I realized this is like a fool's errand. Some of this stuff is so out of whack. How do you handle the dynamic of week 18, especially with questionable motives? Some games have dual questionable motives and some just have one.
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard, and it's more information and news-based for the most part than anything. I mean, I think there's a couple kind of rules in place for me personally. One is, and you'll hear this a lot this week, so this isn't earth-shattering, but the teams that are motivated to win, to get in, usually are overpriced versus the teams that are, out of it. So we've got a couple cases, Jags Titans is a perfect example of that. Where you'll typically see, an extra point or two on the team like Jacksonville, that the motivation's there, that everyone thinks is going to play harder to win. Those teams are typically overvalued, but so historically, and this is 20 plus years that I've been tracking this, kind of the last 2 weeks of an NFL season, when it's purely win or you're out versus a team that's already eliminated. Just fading those teams that need to win has hit 63% against the spread for the last 20 years. It's not as I think as more people are aware of this kind of trend. It's been a little bit more, closer to kind of low 50s in the last couple of years, but still, it's something to keep an eye on. It's not automatic just because you have to win and you're motivated to win that you're going to win. So I think, keep that in mind when you're looking at some of these games. I mean, you look at like Seattle, Arizona, that's an opposite case where the number is not inflated because it's actually gone towards Arizona. So that's one that you might want to keep an eye on. And I wouldn't necessarily back blindly in that case, but the Jags Tennessee is a perfect example of one that could be in that category. And then just in general, just responding to news. I mean, this is like as soon as a coach makes a declaration that he's either going to sit or play starters, or certain guys are out or whatever. And you might get like surprise quarterbacks starting over a veteran. It might be a young guy on a team that is, kind of like the Jarrett Stidham case, last week or even last season with Derek Carr. You might get one of those out of the blue this week. So keep an eye on that, respond quickly. And it's not just the team. If something like that happens where a coach is going to sit starters or, opposite, it's not just the direct involvement with the team that you want to fade or back. It's the domino effect. So how does that increase or decrease the win probability of a team that needs that other team to lose or win? So pay attention, because it's that second order that usually has the biggest delay, I think, in the market. And last year, I know you were going to talk about, I think it was Cincinnati was playing Baltimore at 1:00. And as soon as I think Tyler Huntley was declared out, Anthony Brown was the starter, the Cincinnati line shot up like 3 or 4 points. But them winning made the Chargers-Broncos game at 4:00 essentially meaningless. So that decreased the odds that the Chargers were supposedly going to play their starters. So that line flipped from, I think, Denver plus 3.5 to -3. But that took a little while. It wasn't automatic. So you could have done, if you missed the Cincinnati play, you could have taken a money line parlay, which I ended up doing with Cincinnati and Denver, and got good odds, or just take Denver. So it took a little while for the market to react. So it's not necessarily the first order, it's the second order if there's a domino effect. So those are a couple of things that I personally like to keep an eye on in the final week.
And then you just got to hope that the coach figures out not after 3.5 quarters that they need to pull their starters, like Brandon Staley made all of us sweat last year for no reason. There was also the remember the dynamic of if Jacksonville beats Indy 2 years ago, then all of a sudden the Chargers and Raiders can play for a tie, and like people were betting a mispriced line, and then it got down so low, and then people started betting a line that no longer had value, and it was kind of very wild, the prices people were betting. I guess I'll ask this for Clark and Suma. Preseason is often informational, right? We scour, we hear some news, and we fire and react. Is week 18 in some instances treated the same, where it's like we need to find out intentions of playing roster, and then you react? Suma, I'll start with you.
Yes, I think TA touched on the key points already. I like to separate like these slates into buckets, like games where I have like more confidence that both teams have a lot of motivational angles, are not going to rest like several key guys. For instance, like Bills Dolphins. I mean, we can make the case that the Dolphins might have 99% of a motivational edge and not 100%. With all their injuries, but in general, there are games where you are pretty confident that both teams are going to play for something. I mean, Bears, Packers, like Packers fighting for a wildcard spot. The Bears have that tiny percentage, but we will talk about it. I think that the Bears will be like 100% going into this game, trying to spoil the Packers playoff hopes. So these are the games where you can be pretty sure. Then there is Chiefs Chargers, for example. Like Chargers have nothing to play for, interim head coach. Keenan Allen is basically or is already out for the season. They're going to play some young guys. They have nothing to play for. Chiefs are also likely going to rest their starters because they can't really do much. So I really try to think or sort these games into buckets, and there will be games where there's so much uncertainty where you basically have to react to like some informational pieces, whether it's from coaches and stuff like that, and you have to be at your computer all the time, and because the market will crush this very quickly. And then I would rather, that's a personal preference, I would rather focus on the games where I'm pretty sure that both teams have a lot to play for, and these are much easier to price for me.
Yeah, Clark, you've often said in the past you stay away from stuff like motivational spots or like crazy weather spots, and you just like, how do I like these two teams and how they match up against each other? What do I make a line? Is this a week where you basically eliminate half the games off the board because of the uncertainty, or how do you approach week 18?
Not exactly. I try to focus, kind of like Suma said, on games where I feel like both teams are trying to win. But there are situations where every game is different. And I think if you have an understanding of how each team operates, then you can react to the changes that you see. Like, I'm never going to beat the information of some of the professional bettors that have those inside sources. So I'm not trying to beat the lines before they move. But what I'm trying to do is say, okay, if this happens, what do I make the game under those circumstances? And so in some cases, like every motivational angle is different. Like some teams like Cleveland, they should rest everybody. Like they shouldn't play anyone. They're playing next week and they can't do anything. And then maybe one step down from that is teams like Baltimore and San Francisco, where it's a bit more complicated because they're not playing for 2 more weeks. They're not thinking about the game plan of, what they're going to do in 2 weeks. They might need to get their guys in for a half, for a quarter, something like that. So it's a little bit more complicated. You start looking at, first half lines and things like that. But any team that's been eliminated from the playoffs, I view as a team that wants to win. And that's been a very strong angle for years. Nobody's tanking. Nobody on the field is tanking. Sometimes GMs will tank. And so that might impact inactives for guys that are marginally healthy. And you got to watch out for that. But once those guys take the field, the coaches and the players in almost every case try to win the game. And so sometimes you can find some value on teams that are perceived to be tanking. And that's been true for the last couple of weeks. And it should be true this week as well.
Although I will say that it's true, although it's difficult because there are veteran defenders out there that are they're going to olay some tackles and kind of get out of harm's way. And it's impossible to handicap, but nobody's tanking, but there's definitely, I think, guys making business decisions in the final week of a season, especially if they've got a contract situation coming up and those sorts of things. But again, I agree with you in general. It's just hard to handicap that either way.
Okay, well then let's talk about the first game, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, because we've had some comments in the chat that why is Pittsburgh favored by 3.5? Suma, they're gonna likely Ravens are likely gonna sit some starters. Harbaugh's pretty competitive guy. He likes even winning preseason games and running with his quarterback to get a key third down. But they must be a little bit aware that if Pittsburgh were to win, Buffalo, it may not even be in the playoffs. If you're Baltimore, already locked the 1 seed in, and then you've already beat the crap out of Miami, and maybe there's a scenario where Buffalo doesn't make the playoffs, do you let your foot off the gas? Is that thinking galaxy brain style, or do you think Harbaugh's well aware of what would happen if Pittsburgh won?
I think he's aware, but I would bet that they would not risk the health of their key guys so that Buffalo cannot get in. I mean, Buffalo, yes, it's likely going to be the toughest opponent for the Ravens, but if Buffalo beats Miami, they're going to be the 2nd seed, and you have to play them in the championship game, and a lot of stuff can happen until that. So I would bet that Harbaugh probably prefers his squad being healthy, well rested, and then he can deal with Buffalo in a couple of weeks.
So they're not going to play their star pass rushers when the team is down by 30 with 3 minutes to go, and then lose them both for the year.
Well, the issue too is I don't think Buffalo's going to try. Not just, I mean, it's supposed to be wet, it's supposed to be bad weather conditions. You're not going to put your starters out there and get hurt too. So I think that's another reason. I think that's the bigger reason than it is, keeping Buffalo out. I don't think coaches think that way. I think it's more about the injury factor for me.
All right, let's get into the next game because we spent, we've kind of covered the bases. Houston at Indy. Let's talk about, the line flipped just before we went on the show. So some money came in on Houston and they are the favorite in most books. I know Pinnacle has -1 plus 112, but the money line shows you that Houston is the favorite. Clark, let's think forward thinking before we talk about this game. which team are you more optimistic about going forward in the future? Both have rookie head coaches and rookie QBs that have shown promise. The Colts are playing at this level without their guy. If their guy is any good, like they could be a special bunch, no?
Yeah, but we know that CJ Stroud is good, whereas Anthony Richardson is still a question mark and a major health concern. I mean, the way that he was running early in the year, he was taking hits. He was not running the way Lamar Jackson runs, where he's really smart about getting out of bounds or getting to the ground or just getting hit in the side rather than the head or the injury legs. Anthony Richardson was running with reckless abandon. And so the 2 injuries that happened this year, I would expect to continue unless he changes his style. And even then, he was somewhat inconsistent throwing downfield. We didn't see a level of quarterback play from him that I think we can feel confident in. Whereas what we saw from CJ Stroud was elite quarterback play. And the number one thing that matters when projecting out future years is quarterback play. Coaches matter too, and Shane Steichen has been brilliant. But I think that if you give me the team with the better quarterback over the team with a better coach, I feel confident in that. They also have a bunch of young skill position guys, the way Tank Dell was playing, Nico Collins. I think they've got so much to build around on offense. And then they've even got some young defenders too. So this is a team that I think has room for improvement and is already the better team with the better quarterback. So I think the Texans have the brighter future, especially in the short term.
All right, Cleve, I'll fire this question to you. Houston money came in. Do you expect that number to climb even higher? Are you buying that Houston's the more dangerous team in the market, believes that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think most markets would assume that Houston's the better team on a neutral. I'm actually surprised. Yeah, I thought that Houston would be favored, by a point or two. So I was a little surprised that yesterday Indy saw some money and kind of took over. We saw last week with Will Anderson back, the defense played a lot better. They got Nico Collins and obviously Stroud back. So all of that, gave me kind of more confidence that Houston is the, much better team here. As much as I want Indy to win for my futures equity, I think, you kind of push comes to shove. You take the better quarterback and the better offense. I will say, I do think that the Colts, I love what Shane Steichen's done. I think he's a better coach than DeMeco Ryans from a game strategy perspective and game management. So they do have the edge there, in my opinion. But I'd be surprised if Houston doesn't close the favorite.
Suma, if you're Kansas City at the 3 seed or Cleveland as the 5 seed, you're likely going to play one of these 2 teams. My question is, who would you rather not see in the playoffs?
I would rather not see the Texans. Colts, great season. I agree everything. I agree with everything that TA has said about Shane Steichen. But I think that at some point, Gardner Minshew is limited versus the upside with CJ Stroud in that offense. Yes, they are banked up, but I still think that the upside in the passing game is still higher. And Indy has no defense. So the Texans still have a defensive line. They are top 5 against the run. They can do at least something on defense, combined with an intriguing upside in the passing game. I would absolutely prefer to play Colts if I'm either of those teams.
One thing I forgot to mention, it's a big thing to take a look at, just the type of coverages that Gus Bradley plays with the Colts. He's mainly a cover 3 defensive coach, and that's actually Stroud's a top 10 in EPA against cover 3. He actually struggles the most against cover 1, which the Colts play at like the lowest rate in the NFL. Just for whatever it's worth, I think from that matchup perspective, the defense favors Stroud substantially here versus some other defenses he could be playing.
All right. Well, winner will get in the playoffs, but there's also a chance that they're going to win the division if Jacksonville were to fumble and lose against Tennessee. Cleve, let me throw it to you. Do you expect Trevor Lawrence to play? And if so, are we getting a reduced version of Trevor Lawrence? They've also lost Jamal Agnew now for the year, and they are praying that Zay Jones will be back for this game.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume he's playing. I think that's what the market's assuming at this number. I think it's probably high percentage, the probability. I think the market is. That's why I personally am looking at to me, it's Titans or nothing. But I'm waiting because once he's officially announced in, I think it might get to 6. That's just my personal preference here. If I'm going to wait, there's no reason to take Tennessee right now unless you think that CJ Beathard's going to start. And I just don't. That's with the season on the line. It would be crazy to me if he doesn't. But I think he'll play. And then I think the Zay Jones, it's like every time he doesn't play, the offense sputters, and when he's back in, it's back to normal. And now without Agnew, like they've got nothing behind Calvin Ridley. You got a bunch of rookies. You got Parker Washington out of Penn State, so they really need Zay Jones to play. Seems like he is trending to play, but we'll see. But yeah, I have no idea what to expect from this Jags team. They've just been so hot and cold, and they just have not lived up to expectations. And the Christian Kirk injury has really derailed them, on top of all the stuff that's going on with Zay Jones and with Lawrence. But I would expect them to play.
All right, let's go to Atlanta, New Orleans. I'm going to start with you, Clark. If New Orleans wins and Tampa Bay loses, New Orleans will win the division. They are favored by 3 now. It was larger than that earlier today. But I want to think bigger picture. What went wrong for the Falcons this year? There was a lot of people optimistic about the Falcons. Was it coaching? Was it a quarterback problem? And are they both gone next year, or do you expect one or both of them back?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the Falcons were exactly who the market thought they were in the end. I mean, I bet over 7.5 wins, and then I came back under 8.5 wins, and they're sitting at 7 with, they're 3-point dogs for their 8th win, which means I think they did exactly what we all expected them to do, which was win some games because they have an easy schedule, but not necessarily take the next step because they're limited at quarterback. And I was really optimistic that Desmond Ridder could turn some things he showed on tape that were good as a rookie into growth. And the problem is he didn't. And the problem with Desmond Ridder is that he is not good enough to make up for the critical mistakes he makes in the red zone and with turnovers. They just come at inopportune times, the same way Trevor Lawrence does, the same way Josh Allen does, the same way Brett Favre did, Eli Manning, all these guys. The difference is those guys were making enough plays, positive plays, difference-making plays that they could justify being the starting quarterback of a franchise. And Desmond Ridder doesn't make enough of those plays. He's missing too many throws to make up for it. So I think the quarterback is the number one problem. When Taylor Heineke came in, he was arguably even worse than Ridder. So Heineke's not the answer. I also think that the coach is a problem. Like, it's not either or, it's both. I don't like Arthur Smith. I don't like his style of coaching. I don't like his style of interacting with people. I doubt that his players are super thrilled, to be pumped up and playing for him. So I think they probably need to make all kinds of changes in this franchise. Next year, they probably won't have as easy of a schedule to where they can look like they're a competent team by winning 7 or 8 games. So if they just kind of stay the course and try to improve as a team, I think it's going to go poorly for them. So I think this is a team that has no real bright prospects in the short-term future unless they make some significant changes at quarterback and head coach. So that's my take on the Falcons.
I'm going to ask Cleve about the future quarterback, but Suma, the 3.5 didn't stick, even though the Saints are playing for everything. But I guess the Falcons have motivation as well. Do you think it stays at 3? Do you see it getting under the 3, or do you think some late money on the Saints comes back in?
I don't see it getting under the 3. I think this will probably bounce between 3 and 3.5 for now, and so we'll see what the injury situation holds. Taylor Heineke sounds like he's trying to play, but he was severely banged up at the end of the Bears game, so we'll see what happens there.
Cleve, we're going to play everybody's favorite game. You are the Atlanta Falcons GM. What do you do? Do you make a play for a Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson? Do you make an aggressive play for Justin Fields? Or do you try and draft someone like Michael Penix Jr. later in the first round?
So, I think what happens this week is important, because if they lose, they'll probably be like right around 8 to 10 from a draft pick perspective. If they win, like they're going to be closer to 20. So it's a pretty big gap here, and that would change the math. But if they get a top 10 pick, I think Jaden Daniels is a possibility. He's skyrocketed up the boards, but he's still a distant third, I think, behind Drake May and Caleb Williams from a prospect standpoint. So either he can get to them, or maybe they move up a little bit. But I think you really have to build with a young quarterback if you can, and maybe pair him up with Ryan Tannehill. If they decided to keep Arthur Smith, I'm not sure if they would, but he's a good veteran who will be available, that probably won't cost a ton, that I think can spot start, or can help mentor if the quarterback's not ready, if a young quarterback's not ready. And I honestly think if you put Ryan Tannehill on this team, Like, I think they might have 10 wins right now because of that schedule mainly. Like, I really think, like, he's not great, but he's in the, if you list all the starting quarterbacks in the NFL, he's probably around 20. And he would actually have a real offensive line, not the junk that he has in Tennessee right now. Is probably the worst offensive line in football. And so I think he's still very capable of winning games. And like I said, pair him up with a first-round quarterback. I think that would be the route I would go. Justin Fields is tempting if there's no ability to move up to get a top 3 quarterback, and you don't want to go the veteran route, and you wanted to give up a 3rd-round pick, for Fields, I can live with that. I don't think he's the full-time, the answer to win a Super Bowl, but I think he would be the backup plan.
Not for nothing. The Saints are probably married to Derek Carr one more year, and the Bucs look like they're going to bring back Baker, and Carolina has to give Bryce Young another year. If anything, you could start the rebuild faster and beat every team to the punch and have your guy in year 3 before these other teams have a chance to react. I think they should go for a quarterback. Let's talk Tampa, Carolina. Suma, if the Bucs win, they will be playing the Eagles or the Cowboys in round 1. It's the most obvious home team that's going to be a dog in the playoffs. I think it was the same situation last year with Brady, except they were playing the Cowboys and they were like a 3 or 3.5 point underdog. Are we going to get a line similar, or do you think it has a chance to be even bigger?
So I think that the way that this Eagles squad has looked in recent weeks, I don't think that there would be a big line for them to lay on the road. Dallas, of course, for sure, above the 3, probably somewhere in that 6-ish range, maybe for Dallas, maybe closer to -7. Eagles, I mean, they just not looking like that team that we thought going to the season. Their defense is pretty bad. I think that the Bucs offense would have success against their defense. So I would definitely expect a decent discrepancy right now between the opening lines against Dallas or Philadelphia.
Cleve, you've gone to the well a couple times on on Carolina this year. You're a brave man. Well, you're forcing yourself to watch the game, not for nothing, and that pathetic offense. Any chance that you want to speculate on Carolina again this week, or what?
I mean, but to be fair, I was on them with Houston. They beat Houston. They beat Atlanta.
I know it's not all been bad. It's not all been bad.
I think I'm about 500 back in Carolina, but it just feels like, when you're forced to watch and they don't play well, like last week, I had Carolina +7. Like, who cares about CLV, right? It was horrible. I don't know what to expect. I mean, they were playing better. Their defense was playing well in general. So they're keeping them in all these games. And Bryce Young actually had a really good game 2 weeks ago. I'd be curious to hear what Clark's take on his game against Green Bay from a film perspective. But, just final box score numbers, he had good numbers. His yards per attempt were at the highest all year. So I thought maybe they were trending the right way. DJ Chark had a good game. And then last week just laid a complete egg. The offensive line is a joke. They're not giving him any time. Now he's doing some of that. He's holding the ball a little bit too long, but in general, just not enough protection. I don't know what to think this week. I mean, I think the situation, if you want a situational Suma here, it actually lends itself to Carolina, keeping this game competitive. And it's, not like Tampa is some juggernaut that will just, is used to laying big numbers on the road. I don't even know. Have they been favored on the road all year? I'm not sure. This might be the first time. But, it's a pretty big number. But I think Carolina, as long as they're motivated, and again, we can't handicap. That's really hard to know. They should keep this game interesting. But I have no idea what to think, to be honest, because after last week's performance, like it almost looked like Carolina was shutting it down last week. So who knows what they're doing this week. You would think playing spoiler would motivate a veteran a little bit at the end of the year, but you just never know.
Clark, it's said that at the end of a toxic relationship, there's mounting evidence of bad situations, and yet you look for the optimistic nugget that makes you say, yeah, but sometimes things are good. Bryce Young, that comes far and few between. Why has he been such a disaster? And like, what coach can realistically come in and fix this guy? Or like, is the evidence pretty strong that this is not going to happen for him?
Yeah, I've not been impressed with Bryce Young. The entire offense is broken. He, like Cleve said, he holds onto the ball too long, and then protection is not good enough to allow him to do that. Part of that is his receivers are not consistently getting open. Even they have a bad receiving core, and even then they've been somewhat injured in and out of the year. Their best receiver is like 38 years old. I know he's not really 38, but so Bryce, the task has been difficult for Bryce to accomplish, and he has not done well with it. And what I think the problem with that is, I don't see how it gets any better. They don't have their number one pick. I don't know how they suddenly build a good offense around him to help him grow and succeed in the offseason. If they're able to do that somehow through, what I can't see, maybe he can improve. But I think more likely than not, the key years in his development have trended the wrong direction. And I think it's very, very unlikely that Bryce Young ends up as a impactful starter in the NFL. So if I'm, a head coach candidate, this is not a team that I'm excited to go into. And to Cleve's point against Green Bay, I was impressed with Bryce Young's performance in that game. But when you have 7 bad performances and then 1 good performance against Joe Barry's defense, that basically says, you can have all the time you want. Just go ahead and pick us apart. We'll guard your receiver with a linebacker. And I tend not to put too much stock in that one outcome when not paired with other positive outcomes down the stretch. So it's been pretty much a downhill slide for him since like week 6 or so. So I'm not optimistic about Bryce Young.
Okay, let's move on to Minnesota, Detroit. Detroit's path to the 2 seed is win and then need a Dallas and Philly loss. Dan Campbell comes out and says, I'm playing my starters in the game, and the market reacts a little and goes to 5.5. And then the market came back and said, actually, you know what? Let's take some Minnesota. The line's down to 3. Is this a case of we don't believe you, Dan, or is it a case of if Detroit's up by 10, fourth quarter, 8 minutes to go, starters probably coming out just to make sure everybody's safe, and then maybe Minnesota has a backdoor opportunity? What do you make of the line movement in this game?
So remind me, what does Detroit need? Do they need anything, or are they locked in?
They need a win and then a Dallas and Philly loss. The problem is they play at 1 o'clock and the other 2 play at 4 o'clock. So they're technically motivated. It's just very highly unlikely.
But doesn't Dan Campbell strike you as a guy who would play his starters week 18, no matter what?
Yeah.
That to me, so that's why it's hard. And again, some of these coaches will say that early in the week, and then maybe by Thursday or Friday, they'll kind of, maybe they'll crack a little bit and say, all right,
it's 2 series. It's not the whole game. We're going to come out for 2 series. Yeah.
Yeah. So I could see that being the case, but I don't know. It's really hard to handicap. It's much easier when you have historical precedent like a Sean McVay or a Kyle Shanahan who have done some of these things in the past, or even Andy Reid who always sits guys week 18, right? Like there's precedent with a lot of this stuff, but Dan Campbell does not have that. So, maybe one way to look at it, I'm just thinking now, top of my head, he's a Sean Payton guy. Do we know if Sean Payton historically has done stuff like this? Bill Parcells. I mean, I don't know, maybe we're going back too far, but that's one way to, if you're trying to dissect and try to figure out the puzzle, going back to those type of connections could be a way to do that. But I don't know. I mean, someone might know something if the line just all of a sudden popped. May have insider information on that. I'm not sure. I do have a Detroit contact. I can maybe see if I can find out anything, but I'm in the dark in that case. Maybe. I don't have an answer because I haven't really looked at it. It's pretty recent, so it's hard to know. And I don't even know who Minnesota's starting. Are they starting Jaron Hall? Because I'll take a preseason defense against Jaron Hall at this point. And are they starting Nick Mullins? And Nick Mullins could actually move the ball, even though he'll turn it over. He can move the ball. So I think that matters too. I mean, I think those guys are. I mean, that's probably a 2 to 3 point gap between Hall and Mullins. So I think that matters too.
All right, Suma, you were high on Minnesota. And if not for Kirk Cousins' injury, I think Minnesota's probably in the playoffs and have played really well. What do you think they do QB-wise next year? Do they run it back with Cousins? Is he going to be ready week 1? Do you draft someone like, if you're trying to get inside the mind of Kwesi, where do you think he goes? Because I'm perplexed with what Minnesota ends up doing.
Yeah, me too. I think that he will be ready for week 1. Achilles injuries, he had it in, I think, mid of November. So that would be 9.5 months. I think for a quarterback, that's a lot easier to come back from, because you don't have all the subtle movements as like wide receivers or cornerbacks, for instance. So I think Cousins will be fine week 1, but I still believe that this is the point where the Vikings have to go a different route in terms of quarterback. Try to get some in the draft, maybe Pam with a veteran bridge quarterback, and see what happens throughout the summer. Start whoever you feel comfortable with, but I think it's really time for them to get younger at the position and maybe look for a future outside of Kirk Cousins. And I think if that's the case, I think Kirk Cousins would still have a decent market next summer.
All right, let's. I'm gonna put these two games together: Dallas at Washington, Philly at the Giants. If Dallas wins, they win the division. If Dallas loses and Philly wins, they win the division. If they both lose, Dallas wins the division. Clark, Dallas is favored by 13 in this game. There's a chance for inclement weather. Washington is sitting with the second overall pick. They're probably. I know the ownership doesn't want them to win this game. Is this an overinflated price, or do you think this is fair for given the circumstances?
It's definitely inflated. I mean, all you have to do is look at the 49ers were favored by 13.5 when they were projected to start Jacoby Brissett, and then the Cowboys open as 13.5 point favorites. So I don't think the Cowboys are equal to the 49ers in anyone's book, or even close. So I think the line is inflated. The question is whether or not that's justified. Based on the level of effort that Washington put forth last week, if they replicate that, then I don't see a reason why the line would be so big. They were trying hard. They were hitting. They were playing, like every player out there was playing hard. And so I don't know about this whole like, well, now that it's week 18, maybe they give up on Ron Rivera. I don't like Ron Rivera as a head coach. I don't know that he is having a positive impact on the field, but this is not a depleted roster. This is a roster of players that can play football. Their secondary sucks. Their defense is definitely exploitable. But when you have a huge spread like this, like are the Cowboys going to keep passing deep when they're up by 13 points? I doubt it. And Washington's offense is a type of offense that can come to life in garbage time, although they did struggle to get in the end zone against the 49ers. So I do ultimately think the line is too inflated. But at the same time, if it's Sam Howell again, then I could understand why people would expect the Washington Commanders to come out flat in this game.
All right. Suma, Dallas is likely the 2 seed. They might be playing Green Bay or the Rams or Seattle, or they have a lot of different opponents they could play. Who is the one that would scare them the most? Who's the one team they do not want to see round 1?
I think probably every team with a decent upside on offense, because that I think we can call that Dallas defense like a mid-tier unit. Like, yes, they will always have the games where their pass rush can get extremely hot, and Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence with an incredible game against the Lions can get hot. But overall, they are one of the worst rushing defenses in the league. They are not great against the pass. Yes, they have been at the beginning of the season, but they are really maybe slightly above average against the pass with a downside swing in recent weeks. They cannot defend the run whatsoever. They had issues against almost every offense with a pulse in recent weeks. And just imagine like Seattle moved the ball at will on them. It would be a super tough road game for Jordan Love. First playoff road start, super young wide receivers. I would not trust them to be really super competitive over 60 minutes. But this is the kind of offense, like if Matt LaFleur is in his bag, like I don't think that Dallas has the defense to really shut them down. Pass protection is very decent for Green Bay. So if Matt LaFleur is in his bag and they can run the ball and use all their play action off of it, like I would be scared if I was the Dallas defense, even though I still don't think that it would be a super great spot for such a young offense.
All right, Cleve, Philly is favored by 5. This is like one of the few cases where a team needs a win and the money's come in against them, or at least nobody's looking to back Philly. Is this like a rare case of Philly goes into the halftime, sees Dallas is up by 20, and then says, all right, let's pull our guys? If that is the case, do you think people would be better off backing Philly maybe as a first half bet as opposed to a full game bet?
Yeah, I mean, I think given the options for sure, although I haven't looked, I would assume that's priced in already. I'm sure it's not 2.5 right now at first half. It's probably closer to the 4 or 5 number, if I had to guess. But I think that Philly's one.
You can get at Pinnacle -3, -101, and 2.5 -120 for first half.
Okay, so it's not totally priced in. So it's not bad if you're looking to Philly. I guess that's the way you'd go. But yeah, Philly's one of the obviously most forward-thinking front offices, analytically focused. So they're smart. They know what the win probabilities are. They've known that for a while. So that's in the back of their head, and they know that the risk of injury is way higher than the upside of getting the division. So and I'm sure they're not like shaking in their boots to having to play at Tampa or the Saints. So really, that's not like you're going to Buffalo on the other side. It's not that big of a deal. So I don't think it really matters to them. So they may sit guys before the game. It may not even be a first half, second half thing. So especially with the Devonta Smith injury, like there's no way he's going to play. I can't imagine. He came out with a walking boot. I don't care if it's a mild sprain. Like you do not put him out there. Again, this is another game that could have snow and wet conditions in New York, mind you, the worst field in the NFL. And that's another reason, right? Like, why would you play anybody here with that field that has been known to tear Achilles tendons and have multiple injuries? Your team had to feel that, right? So yeah, I think that the fact that this is 5 is telling you that there's a high probability of some level of resting guys. And quite honestly, that 5 might be too high. So is this the obligatory Rashad Penny out of nowhere 156 yards rushing game when he's finally active? Because it feels like this is the spot, right? Boston Scott, anytime touchdown, hot bet last week, hot bet this week. All right, 2 more games, and this one has probably been the most talked about in the chat. Chicago, Green Bay. Suma, Green Bay was a roller coaster at times this season. They've kind of built a lot of momentum aside from 1 or 2 stumbles in the second half of the season. Chicago's been one of the better frisky teams now since probably week 5 or 6. The number is like teetering between 3 and 3.25. Do you think we get to a full 3.5? Do you think people will want to back Chicago as soon as they know for sure the starters are in? Where do you see this line going and developing?
So we have been there for like 1 minute earlier today, and market moved towards 3.5, and they got immediately smashed back. Like there was like super high resistance at 3.5. I would not expect that to get to a 3.5 and stay there. I think there will be too much of an appetite for the Bears. Like this is the Bears Super Bowl, correct? Like even if they have 0 chance of reaching the playoffs, this is their Super Bowl. Going into Lambeau Field, like all the stuff that happened, they got blown out in week 1. They were the laughing stock of the NFL, trying to turn Justin Fields into a pocket passer. And then now all of a sudden they're on a little hot streak. Their defense is playing well. Justin Fields is playing much better. They got a run game. Like this has to be, from a motivational angle, their absolute Super Bowl of the season, just trying to spoil their rivals' playoff hopes. And I mean, if you look at that Packers defense with Joe Barry and you think about all the stuff that the Bears offense can do on offense, like the run game, Justin Fields, passing game has been working. Like I would be extremely afraid if I was a Packers supporter, Packers fan, with that defense in this spot against Justin Fields and company. So I can totally understand why there was appetite for the Bears at 3.5. I think this is a super tough matchup for the Packers. There's also still dealing with injuries on offense. Christian Watson this is a typical timeline for a hamstring injury where he could be back. But the Packers are one of those teams, they are super conservative with their players. Like, if there was the slightest doubt that someone could have a high re-injury risk, they will not put them out. So I would not bank on Christian Watson being back. So this is still a young offense. Yes, John Love has been playing very well, but they're going to go against a super tough Bears defense. And yeah, I think it comes down to the other side for me. I would be scared to death looking at this Joe Barry defense defending the Bears dual threat rushing attack.
Do we know,
Clark,
is Jalen Johnson playing? Do you guys, sorry, not to interrupt. Have you guys heard anything? He left the game last week.
Yeah.
And
so
he's a guy in
Reed.
a contract here, right? So is he going to play this week?
Not sure yet. I guess Wednesday's practice report. I mean, Jaden Reed also left the game, so he's
Chest
another one to
injury.
watch. So there's some injuries to be watching. Preston Smith. Clark, is it weird to say that not only do I feel worried and vulnerable about the Packers in this game, but I'm also optimistic against Dallas, Philly, or Detroit? Like, this is who this team is, right? The highs are high and the lows can be low, and that's just the reality of Green Bay, right?
Exactly. They're the type of team that can beat good teams and lose to bad teams. And we've seen it so many times this year. They went on a run against, what was it, the Chiefs and the Chargers. I guess Chargers aren't good now, but Chargers,
Lions.
Chiefs, and then Lions, yeah. Right? But then they lost to like really bad teams. And so that happens when you have a sort of high variance quarterback who's willing to throw the ball downfield. Like, he will chuck it anytime he sees any opening. And so when that's clicking, you can beat even good defenses doing that. And then on the other side of the ball, their defense is their biggest liability. But just because of the way that football works, sometimes even good offenses can fail against bad defenses because a fumbled snap, a holding penalty that forces a 1st and 20, a dropped pass on a 3rd down on a guy that was wide open. There's all kinds of ways that offenses can fail that have nothing to do with the quality of the defense. And so if they get into a game against a better team and that better team has a bad day on offense, they're the type of offense that can make them pay for that and punish them and win as an underdog in the playoffs. So that's why I want to see the Packers in the playoffs, and I do think they're live.
The one thing I will say, Jordan Love's 4 best games have come with a healthy Aaron Jones. And the last 2 weeks, Aaron Jones has been healthy again. Cleve, this one got a lot of traction in the chat. It's the big question with the Bears. What do they do with the pick? Jeremy Fowler from ESPN says his league sources forecast that the Bears probably get a 2 or 3 for Justin Fields. I think it's a 2 or a 2+. And then the Bears would obviously get way more than the Bryce Young package, even potentially from a team picking in the top 5. Cleve, do you trade that first overall pick, move down a few slots, get Marvin Harrison Jr. and build around Fields? Or do you draft the QB, trade Fields, take your second, and then use your other picks to build around Caleb Williams or Drake May?
I take a quarterback 1, call it Caleb Williams just for fun. And then I take Fields and my 1st round pick, and I move up and try to get Harrison. Can I do that?
Yeah, well, you could probably call Atlanta, right, if they lose and say, hey, Justin Fields and our pick in the 15th, 18th range for your 8 or 9. And then from
That's probably
there,
not good enough for Harrison, but yeah.
Yeah, then you're probably still another trade away. It also depends on how much New England picking 3rd loves Jaden Daniels, because if they go 1, 2, then Arizona's going to take Marvin Harrison. It's hard, but this is a really good receiver draft. The guy from Washington is probably the 2nd or 3rd best receiver. And
Jan Coleman's good too for Florida State. Yeah, I mean, I like, I'm an Ohio State guy, so I like Fields, but I don't think he's your franchise quarterback. I just like, he does exciting things. He can make plays. He can keep it competitive. Like, is he the guy that for the next decade is going to be in the, deep in the playoffs every year and win you a Super Bowl? I just don't see it. And especially with running quarterbacks, like, that falls off in a hurry. And then what do you have? So, like, if he's going to be successful, it's going to be really short term until, things happen with his legs. So I personally think you just get as much as you can for the asset. If it's a 2nd or 3rd round pick, like I said, if you needed to move up from where you're currently picking on top of the number 1 pick, then I think it's a really good move. But I think you got to take your quarterback at 1. I wonder how the GM, I wonder how Ryan Poles is feeling that they're winning all these games late, because his job was a lot easier like a month ago. Like he easily could have just moved on, right? If the Bears had lost a bunch of games.
And Fields is winning the crowd over, like they're chanting.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
This is that's where you can't make the wrong decision.
That's where the problem lies. Like, and I guess with Poles, it's if you make that trade and then you draft a Caleb Williams or a Drake May, and they end up having, looking like Bryce Young, and then, I mean, you're out of the job anyway. But if you keep Fields and you're just a 7 or 8 win team every year, you're out of job anyway. Like, just go with your quarterback that you inherited Fields. It wasn't your pick. So go with the quarterback that you're picking yourself, and you lay it on the line. I mean, you have so many assets, and their defense went from the worst in the NFL to one of the best out of nowhere. Like, that was impressive. And they've got some good young talent. They could still use, some guys on the offensive line, especially. So if they don't move up for receiver, just stay there, take the best old lineman to go with your number one quarterback. And then, if you get a second or third round pick for Fields, I think that's, it's one of those things that might end up being like, a third that turns into a second based on incentives. Like, there's all these, different milestones. There's all these different ways to do it. You could swap later round picks and get a higher second. Like, there's different ways to do it. I think there's going to be a market for Fields. So that's the way I would do it. But again, these GMs and these front office guys, when you've got, fans and local media and everyone kind of on one side, if they're all on Fields' side, it does make it harder, because ownership does care about fan perception. Like, that's as bad as it sounds, that is part of the process, and that's how they think. So it's not as simple as like a fantasy football trade here.
Well, Nathan in the comments says Jaden Daniels at 3 is a reach. And Nathan, I got news for you. If you think a guy could be your franchise quarterback, 3 is not a reach. And if someone falls in love with him, we could see a 1, 2, 3. New England needs a quarterback, and they'll be picking 3rd. Okay. Save the best game for last. The NFL scheduled it, so I have maximum torture on Sunday. I will be sick to my stomach until the game starts, and then when you feel a little bit of easiness of how the game will play out, you get a little bit more optimistic. I have no idea what to make of this game. And let's start off, Cleve. We'll start with you. Buffalo opens up as a 3-point favorite. I don't know. This line doesn't make sense if Tua doesn't play. But I understand like the optimism around Buffalo right now and the desperation. And frankly, Miami's banged up. It's kind of gross what we've been going through for 2 months. Do you see Miami money coming in the second we know Tua's playing, or do you think this sticks at 3?
Yeah, I think once you get confirmation that Tua's playing, I think this maybe ticks down to 2.5. That's just my thinking. I was surprised when I saw the 3, but again, there are so many injuries, but it's not like the Bills are playing well. Like they looked terrible last week. They could have lost to the Chargers 2 weeks ago. They really haven't. It's like you want Buffalo. They looked awesome against Dallas, but outside of that, they've had some major issues. It's not like they're a dominant team. Their defense is playing a lot better. But I don't think like Bradley Chubb on his own or Xavier Howard on his own is moving this line a couple points. So it's clearly a Tua number. And I would suspect he's going to play, right? Like maybe do they sit him and just take the risk and say that, we'll just see you in the playoffs. Like, you got to go at Kansas City probably, but I don't know. I mean, it's like, I don't know how bad the shoulder injury is. So if he plays, I don't think this is 3. That's for sure. There's no way you can get to 3. But
if we don't bench our stars in blowouts with 3 minutes to go, then I'm not optimistic. Mike McDaniel understands the importance of not having great guys on the field in meaningless games. Suma, how dangerous is Buffalo if they're the 2 seed? Should they be favored? They won't be favored going into Baltimore if they played hypothetically in an AFC Championship game. But if you're creating Super Bowl odds, should Buffalo be considered the favorite over Baltimore, or no? They've got an extra game, and Baltimore has 2 home games. How would you rank them if Buffalo were able to get that 2 seed?
Yeah, and it's still Baltimore 1 and Buffalo 2nd. I think Buffalo, it's very interesting. Like, their defense has gotten much better since that midseason slump. Daquan Jones is back. He has been one of the best defensive tackles until that London game where I think he tore his pectoral. I don't remember correctly. Safety rotation is getting healthy. They needed some time to gel at cornerback, I think. I think Rasul Douglas was a phenomenal addition. Benford and Taron Johnson are still playing well. Terrell Dodson has been a major surprise at linebacker for them after Matt Milano went down. So I think this is a very scary defense, not in the sense that they can take over games or something, but I think that they are very stable. They have some depth up front. They have a decent secondary. So their defense is good enough to hang in these playoff games. And their offense, I mean, yes, they have been playing very poorly, especially Josh Allen through the air. But the question is, like, do you believe that's really like what we should expect going forward? Because that's not been there for the entire season. Their run game got better. Offensive line is okay, but I still think that this offense still has a very, very decent baseline. And as soon as things start to click on offense a little bit more, you are probably looking at a decent playoff defense with a with an offense with a supernova at quarterback who can get hot like in like any given week. Yes, the shoulder injury might be some concern, but it doesn't sound like we should be really concerned midterm during the playoffs. So, I mean, I think that this team is very, very dangerous because I still think that their offense will somehow get closer to that point that we used to know about them.
There are some people holding some outrageous futures prices on Buffalo. I think this is one where like sharp squares, everybody saw the price and like, obviously we have to take Buffalo here. And that ticket could be meaningless at 11:30 on Sunday night just because of how the schedule unfolds. Clark, if Miami were to lose, they'd be the 6th seed going into Kansas City. Who do you like in that scenario? Where do you see the line going, and who do you like in that matchup?
I don't know if you know this, George, but Miami has not played well against good teams this year. When they first played Buffalo, they completely no-showed. And to that point, it was like, okay, well, Miami can beat bad teams, but can they beat good teams? And since then, every time they've had the opportunity to answer, they've failed with one exception against the Cowboys. And that involved, some Dak fumbling on the goal line, things like that. But they did win. It was a good win. But their net point differential against playoff teams this year is -84. And so it's not been pretty. And I don't think that they could justifiably be anything. I don't think they can be pick'em in Kansas City. I think it would have to be at least -3 for Kansas City. Just because going on the road, that would also mean that they lost this game to the Bills. So, what do we learn about how the injuries impact them moving forward? We might, slightly downgrade them for that. You've got the whole Patrick Mahomes at home in the playoffs. Like, I know that he hasn't looked good. The offenses look bad. But he does have that sort of killer instinct that goes into overdrive during the playoffs that could be enough at the margins for them to win. So I would definitely favor the Chiefs at home against Miami, especially considering that would mean they lost to the Bills. I don't have a ton of optimism for Miami going deep if they start the playoffs as the 6th seed.
It was Monday Night Football, December 12th. It was my birthday, and the Miami Dolphins were 14-point favorites against Tennessee, and they were up by 14 with 5 minutes to go. And had we won, we would be the 2 seed, and I wouldn't even care about this game today. And
George, you know what the downfall was? I think you declared after they beat. I blame you. You declared a lot of things a few weeks ago.
That was the first time I opened my mouth up about Miami because I counted all the easy wins, and then I considered Dallas Baltimore coin flips were like just win one, and we're there. And I guess I overlooked Mike Vrabel, who like for 3 years has been giving it to me in the backside because on paper I don't like Tennessee's roster, and somehow they rise to the occasion. Like Tennessee objectively has looked like shit for 6 weeks, but they found magic 1 week on that Monday Night Football. Like they're awful, right? Like Tennessee hasn't looked like they had a pulse in months.
1 week is too generous. It was more like 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was 2.
One thing, George.
Yeah.
Did you say you opened your mouth about Miami for the first time that week?
I was
For the
I
first time.
I was controlled, Suma. When we were 6-1, 7-1, or whatever the hell we were, I wasn't over the top. You know, it's that one time I threw the hat on. I got excited. I said it's time, and I blame myself. It was bad karma, bad juju. You know, there's a lot of people
Blame
that
the bourbon. Can you just blame
Yeah.
bourbon?
That's a cause of a lot of blame, including New Year's and how I felt yesterday. Guys, thank you so much for this all-star show. Maybe we'll do this again in the playoffs, because I know we're going to be special programming come playoffs, because there's no way we can do 5 games of content on 5 days of content on 4 or 5 games a week. But I'd like to do this again. Thank you guys for your time. As a reminder, Forward Progress will be back again tomorrow at 2:00 with our prediction and pick show. Rob Pizzola, Eric Eager, Suma, and Hitman giving you their best bets and breaking down games from a betting perspective. That's it for me. Before you go, smash the like button, hit subscribe. We got to pass Joey Kanish so we can throw it in his face. I don't know what that text says, Clark. Is it anything positive or negative about Miami? You got to read it to me. I can barely
George. It says me to George. Titans win outright. And then George laughing emoji. 2 are going to light that secondary up like a Christmas tree.
Clark will not be here next week, gentlemen. Thanks to Cleve. Thanks to Suma. Thanks to Clark. Thanks to producer Jason. And thanks to you, the audience. Until next time, go Dolphins. Let's bet them.